After 3 years of caring for our sick mother, my half-brother Eric forged legal documents to steal her house, and my daughter Tammy believed him when he said I was losing my mind. That betrayal nearly broke me. But when the truth came out in front of the entire town, I let him talk himself straight into a fraud investigation. It all started with the letter that arrived on a Wednesday, folded inside a manila envelope that reeked faintly of mildew and betrayal. Inside, I found two things. First, a printed copy of a legal deed transferring ownership of my parents' house, my house now, legally, to my half-brother Eric. Second, a single sticky note in Eric's cramped, jagged handwriting. "This is for the best. You're not well. Take care of yourself." My ears rang. I sat down right on the kitchen linoleum, the cold seeping into my bones, as if my body needed help processing the shock. I reread the document 3 times. My name was nowhere. Instead, it listed Eric Langston as the sole owner of 317 Maple Run Drive. Effective retroactively. Retroactively? My hand shook as I turned over the last page. The signature was there. Mine. Only it wasn't. My signature loops. Always has. This one looked like it had been forged by someone who failed cursive in grade school. I was 58 years old. A retired hospice nurse. A widow. I'd spent the last 3 years caring for our mother full-time, until she passed last November. No pay, no help, just long days and longer nights sitting beside her recliner, with the oxygen machine hissing like a slow leak in my soul. And now this? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You are hereby notified to vacate the premises within 72 hours. Any attempt to enter the property may result in legal action." On behalf of Mr. Langston, I knew who it was from. Eric. He'd always been my father's mistake and my mother's guilt. 14 years younger, born from a second marriage. Mom tried hard not to regret. I practically raised him. And the moment he could walk, he started lying. Broke things and blamed me. Skipped school and told Mom I'd said it was okay. Once told the neighbors I was stealing pills from the hospice cart. Back then, I thought he was just a boy. Now I saw what he really was. A boy who never stopped pretending he was a man. The front door creaked. I froze. Eric's voice floated in, casual as if he were dropping by for coffee. "Hey, Deb, just grabbing a few things." I stood up so fast my knee popped. "You forged my name." My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Eric stepped into the kitchen, wearing a windbreaker and a smug little half-smile. "Don't do this, Deborah. Let's not make it worse." I stared at him. "You broke the law." He tilted his head like a disappointed teacher. "Come on, everyone knows you've been off. You've had episodes." "What episodes?" My voice went cold. He shrugged. "I'm not trying to fight you. I'm helping. I have statements from neighbors, old coworkers, even Tammy." My chest constricted. Tammy. My daughter. She and I hadn't spoken much since her divorce. She thought I hovered. That I got too intense about the kids. Had he gotten to her? "You have no legal standing," I said. "Mom left me the house. She left it to her children," Eric replied smoothly. "You're just not in a state to manage it." Then he dropped the bomb. "You've been declared mentally unfit. The court signed off 2 weeks ago." That was when I knew. This wasn't just betrayal. This was premeditated, coordinated, cruel. "Get out of my house," I whispered. Eric held up a manila envelope. "Another one. This is a restraining order. You need to leave now. You're trespassing." I didn't move. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even call the sheriff, though I had every right. Instead, I grabbed my keys, walked out the front door, and slid behind the wheel of my Subaru. I didn't even pack a bag. Just drove off with my dignity rattling in the glove box. That night, I slept in the grocery store parking lot behind the old Methodist church. Cold air crept through the seams of my jacket as I watched the lights shut off one by one across the town I'd spent my whole life serving. He thought I was weak. He thought wrong. Tomorrow, I'd start quietly undoing every lie he ever told, starting with the deed and ending with the truth. The guest room at Donna's place smelled like peppermint foot lotion and lemon Lysol, and I was grateful for both. Donna and I met 20 years ago at the hospice unit. She was the social worker who always snuck peppermints into her pocket. We hadn't been close in a while, but when I showed up on her porch that morning, mascara smudged and voice trembling. She opened the door and just said, "You want coffee or silence?" I chose silence. I stayed mostly quiet that day, but not idle. First, I drove to the county records office. It was tucked between the courthouse and a shuttered coffee shop, one of those places where the walls are lined with cheap wood paneling, and the receptionist doesn't ask too many questions. I asked for the deed history on 317 Maple Run Drive. The clerk, Margie, glanced up at me from behind her reader glasses. "You the owner?" "Yes, ma'am," I replied, holding her gaze. Her fingers tapped at the keyboard. Then she frowned. "Says here the transfer happened last month. You don't show up at all, sweetheart." "Just an Eric Langston. Looks like the signature was verified by a Dr. Alan K. Moore." I leaned in. "Could I see the file?" Margie hesitated, then tilted her monitor so I could peek. She pointed to a scanned copy of the transfer paperwork, the corner folded, the edges faintly smudged. There it was, a signature that looked vaguely like mine, but off, slanted, rushed, and flat. I know my own hand. And next to it, under the professional oversight section, was a name I hadn't heard in years. "Dr. Alan K. Moore," I read aloud. "That's strange." Margie raised an eyebrow. "You know him?" I did. "He died in 2019. Her mouth opened slightly. "You sure?" "Positive. I did his wife's hospice care. I held her hand the day she passed." We both stared at the screen. Margie gave a low whistle. "That's not good." I nodded slowly. "Could I get a printed copy of this?" She nodded back, already reaching for the printer button. "Deborah Harrison, right?" I blinked. "How'd you?" "I remember you. You brought my sister a blanket when she was dying. Purple one, with little sunflowers." The corners of my eyes stung. I left the office with the printout in a large manila envelope. It wasn't the first paper Eric had faked, but it might be the last. Back at Donna's, I opened an old plastic bin I'd dragged out of her garage. It was full of my nursing folders, records, notebooks, things I'd kept from years of home visits and hospice assignments. About halfway down, wedged between a Medicare handbook and a stained apron, I found it. Mom's will. I hadn't looked at it since the funeral. At the time, I'd been too grief-stricken to double-check the legalities. She'd always said everything would go to me. You know Eric wouldn't know how to keep the gutters cleaned, baby. And I'd taken her at her word. But here it was, a notarized official copy, dated, witnessed, and signed in her favorite blue pen. I read every line. It named me, Deborah Elaine Harrison, as sole heir to the house and all possessions within. Eric wasn't mentioned once. I stared at the page, my chest heavy but calm. There was my breadcrumb. And I had more to collect. Over the next 2 days, I worked in silence. Donna let me stay as long as I needed, her only rule being I had to eat breakfast and tell her one thing that made me laugh. That Saturday I found it. An old voicemail I'd forgotten I had, tucked in my backup iCloud archive. Eric's voice, slurred. "Man, I can't believe we pulled it off. Witch is finally out of that house. Janice already moved her stuff in. This place is gonna be killer when we redo the deck. Huh, cheers, babe." I stared at the screen. The voicemail was time-stamped, day after Mom's funeral. He was celebrating, not grieving, not mourning, celebrating. I took a screenshot of the timestamp, emailed the voicemail to myself, and backed it up 3 times. Then I opened Facebook. I hadn't touched it in months, but Janice's page was public. Still wide open, still dumb as ever. Her latest post was from the sunroom I grew up in, the caption reading, "My dream come true, dizzy #mansion life, #blessed and obsessed." There were 6 photos. One featured her foot propped up on the fireplace hearth, where Mom used to keep her porcelain cat figurines. Another showed my childhood bedroom, painted pale gray, all the color stripped away. I saved every photo, every caption, every bit of evidence. He wanted to play games? Fine. He'd forgotten I spent 20 years documenting the undocumented. I knew how to keep records, how to build a case. And now, I had what I needed. The will, the deed, the forged doctor, the voicemail, the posts. He thought I'd unravel. But I was knitting something stronger. Tammy showed up on Sunday afternoon. She knocked twice, then let herself in like she always used to, calling out a cautious, "Mom?" I was sitting on Donna's sun porch with a folder in my lap, every page inside it organized by date, source, and incident. I didn't look up right away. I wanted to see her expression before I said a word. She looked tired. Still beautiful in that way daughters always are to their mothers, even when their eyes are skeptical and their lips tight with old grudges. She hadn't hugged me since the funeral. We used to be close. She used to call me after work just to chat on her drive home. Then one day she stopped. "Donna said you were here," she said, arms crossed. "You didn't answer my texts." I tapped the folder in my lap. I was working. She sat across from me, hands clenched in her lap. "Eric called me, said you broke into the house, that you're refusing to get help." I felt the burn start in my throat. "He's lying." Tammy shrugged. "He says you've had episodes, that he's worried you're not safe to be alone." "And you believed him?" "I don't know what to believe," she snapped. "You haven't exactly been yourself, Mom. You keep disappearing. You wouldn't come to dinner last week. You didn't even come to Emma's dance recital." I closed the folder. "Tammy, do you remember what your grandmother wanted for that house?" She frowned. "She always said it would be yours. You took care of her, I know that." "She had a will," I said. "A notarized one. I found it." Tammy blinked. I reached into the folder and pulled it out. I laid it gently on the glass table between us. The name glinted in blue ink. My name. She left it to me. Sole heir. Tammy looked down at it, but didn't touch it. "Then why does Eric have the deed?" "Because he forged it." She scoffed, but not as harshly as I expected. "You're telling me he faked legal documents?" I handed her the printout from the courthouse. "This signature. Not mine. And the doctor who supposedly verified it? Dead for 5 years." Her mouth parted. "Mom, there's more." I tapped my phone, scrolling to the voicemail. I hit play. Eric's voice filled the room, slurred and smug. "Witch is finally out of that house. Janice already moved her stuff in." Tammy's breath caught. I saw the change in her face, the way her jaw slackened, the color draining from her cheeks. "He was laughing," I said quietly, "the day after the funeral." She picked up the phone, staring at the screen like it might bite her. I didn't know," she whispered. "He told me you were spiraling, that you'd been acting paranoid, locking the doors and talking to yourself." "I was grieving," I snapped, "and I was trying to protect what was mine." She nodded slowly. Then her voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked her square in the eye. "Because you wouldn't have believed me." She flinched. That part hurt both of us, but she didn't deny it. I stood and went to the kitchen, grabbing the manila envelope with the screenshots of Janice's Facebook posts. I laid them out like playing cards. "She's already decorating. She calls it her mansion." Tammy's hands trembled as she picked one up. "That's Emma's old playroom," she said. "Mom, this is—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Her face told me everything I needed to know. She finally saw him. Not the charming uncle who played games with the grandkids. Not the brother who showed up with store-bought pies on holidays. She saw the liar. The thief. The man who'd weaponized her mother's grief. "I can't believe I defended him," she whispered. I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You're here now." She nodded, squeezing back. "What do we do?" I opened the folder again and slid the last page across the table. "We make this public. There's a town meeting Tuesday night. They're dedicating the community garden to Mom." Tammy's eyes narrowed. "He'll be there," I nodded. "And so will I." For the first time in weeks I saw her smile. A real one. "You're gonna bury him, aren't you?" "No," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm going to let him dig his own grave. I'm just bringing the shovel." Tuesday evening arrived, draped in small-town politeness and the scent of freshly cut grass. The community garden, now renamed in my mother's honor, the Marjorie Langston Memorial Grove, looked lovely. It sat right behind the library, with a white trellis and mismatched lawn chairs that still bore the marks of last summer's sun. The whole town had been invited. Everyone brought cookies. The mayor wore his brown suit with the elbow patches like it was Easter. I stood just outside the gathering, watching as Eric shook hands like a politician and pointed out his so-called renovations on the property. He was in full campaign mode, tight smile, pressed khakis, sleeves rolled up like he'd ever planted anything besides lies. Janice stood at his side in platform sandals and a lemon-yellow jumpsuit, holding a mason jar of sweet tea she didn't drink. I wondered if she knew what he'd done to get that house. I wondered if she even cared. Tammy walked in beside me, her back straight and her chin high. She wore black jeans and the same leather jacket she used to steal from my closet in high school. There was no mistaking it. We were mother and daughter again. "Ready?" she whispered. "I've been ready," I replied. I clutched a slim file folder in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. It wasn't heavy, but it felt like armor. Then I spotted her, Margie, the courthouse clerk, sitting under the pavilion with her tote bag on her lap. She caught my eye and gave a tiny nod. That was the plan. When the microphone passed to her for the official remarks, she'd read the letter. The real one. The one Mom had filed with the county clerk a year before she died. Notarized, signed, and sealed. It named me as sole heir. She hadn't trusted Eric. Neither had I. Up on the makeshift podium, a low stage built from plywood and borrowed risers, the mayor tapped the mic. "Welcome, everyone," he beamed. "Tonight, we honor a woman who gave so much to this community. Nurse, mother, gardener, friend, Marjorie Langston." There was polite applause. Eric stepped forward next. I could see the smirk before he even opened his mouth. "My mother always taught us that family means showing up," he said, voice syrupy. "When her health declined, I made the difficult choice to return to care for her. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." Tammy squeezed my hand. "She wanted this garden to be a place of peace," he continued, placing a dramatic hand on his chest, "a legacy I'm proud to carry forward in her honor." I almost laughed. He was laying it on so thick I expected someone to hand out rain boots. "And now," the mayor said, glancing at the paper in his hand, "we have a few words from someone who worked closely with Marjorie in her final years. Margie from the county records office." Eric's brow furrowed. That wasn't part of his program. Margie stood slowly and made her way to the mic. She wore her reading glasses low on her nose and carried a sheet of paper, folded once, neatly. I knew what it was. I'd handed it to her myself an hour earlier, down at the diner over coffee and a slice of banana cream pie. "Evening," she said, clearing her throat. "I'd like to read a letter that was filed at the courthouse on October 4th of last year. It was notarized and submitted as part of a living will package by Marjorie Langston herself." Murmurs stirred in the crowd. Eric's smile began to slide off his face. Margie unfolded the letter. "To whom it may concern, I, Marjorie Langston, being of sound mind, declare that upon my passing, the house at 317 Maple Run, Drive and all belongings therein, shall go to my daughter Deborah Elaine Harrison. My son, Eric Langston, is not to inherit property or financial assets, due to ongoing concerns I have documented privately." Gasps. Actual, audible gasps. Tammy looked at me with wide eyes. Margie kept reading. "I love both of my children, but I trust only one with this responsibility. I ask that this be honored fully. Signed, Marjorie Langston." When she finished, the air went dead still. Then all at once, the crowd came alive, whispers, shifting feet, sideways glances. Eric stormed toward the stage. "That's fake," he barked. "She's lying." Margie didn't blink. "County seals on the back, filed properly. You can confirm it tomorrow morning." He turned to the mayor. "This isn't part of the program. She's not allowed." "I believe this is a public space," Margie cut in, her southern drawl smooth as ever. "And a public record." The mayor stepped back, palms up, eyes wide. Janice looked like she wanted to crawl into her lemon jumpsuit and disappear. I took one slow step forward, finally letting them all see me. "You stole my mother's house," I said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "But you forgot the one thing she taught us both. I keep better records." Eric froze mid-step. "Deborah," he growled, "you don't know what you're doing." I smiled. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Eric didn't say another word after that, not to me, not to Margie, not to the cluster of townsfolk who'd started pulling out their phones like they were waiting for a second act. Instead, He stormed off the platform, brushing past Janice, who took a careful step back, like she wasn't quite sure if she still wanted to be part of whatever mess he'd dragged her into. I stood there in the hush that followed, the evening sun casting long shadows across the grass. It was Tammy who spoke next. She stepped up beside me, her voice steady. "There's more." Margie, bless her, stepped aside and handed Tammy the microphone without a fuss. "My Uncle Eric forged documents to transfer the deed to my grandmother's house," she said, scanning the faces in the crowd. "He filed them under a fake medical assessment, citing that my mom, Deborah Harrison, was mentally unfit. The doctor listed on the paperwork has been deceased for over 5 years." Gasps again, this time sharper. A man in the back, Reverend Cole, crossed his arms and nodded, slow and solemn. He had baptized half the town and buried the other half. "If he believed you, people followed," Tammy continued. "We also have a voicemail Eric left by accident." She looked toward the back of the crowd, where Eric now stood stiff as a fence post, where he brags about getting rid of the witch and says Janice moved in before the funeral flowers had even wilted. Janice's head whipped toward him so fast I thought she might snap something. She hissed something under her breath and pulled out her phone, typing furiously. And just to tie it all up, Tammy flipped through a folder I'd handed her earlier. Janice has been documenting their mansion life online. Photos of the house, captioned like she won a game show. Some of those pictures show personal family property that doesn't belong to either of them, which makes it theft. By now, several folks had stepped away from the punch table, drawn in like moths to a courtroom flame. The mayor coughed lightly. Perhaps this should be taken to the proper." "It already is," I said. "My attorney filed a motion this morning for emergency injunction on the title transfer. The fraud investigation is open. County law enforcement has copies of everything." Eric opened his mouth like he might protest, but Janice beat him to it. "You told me the house was yours," she hissed, walking fast across the lawn toward him. "You said she was unstable, that your mother wanted you to have it." He reached for her arm. She yanked away. "You made me post those stupid pictures," she shrieked. "You said it made us look legit." He lowered his voice, teeth clenched. "Janice, shut up." Too late. People had gathered now in small, whispering clusters. The mayor had slunk toward the cookie table. Reverend Cole just shook his head and pulled out his phone. Probably to pray. Maybe to post. Janice lifted her phone and held it out. "You think I'm going down for you?" I deleted nothing. Every photo, every caption, still on the cloud. She turned to me. "I'll send them all to you." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. She gave me a tight, angry smile. "And just so we're clear, I never liked the curtains in that house anyway." Then she turned on her heel and marched off across the lawn, heels stabbing into the grass like she wanted the earth itself to feel her fury. Eric stared after her, slack-jawed, then slowly turned back to face me. "You're ruining my life," he muttered. I tilted my head. "No," I said quietly. "You did that when you underestimated the woman who raised you." 2 days after the garden showdown, I was in Donna's kitchen stirring sugar into my coffee when the doorbell rang. Donna peeked through the blinds. "It's the sheriff." My heart thudded, not out of fear, out of relief. Sheriff Cal Pearson had been wearing a badge longer than Eric had been alive. He and my mother used to serve on the community watch board together. He was fair, quiet, and allergic to drama, which meant he didn't show up on porches unless he had cause. I opened the door before he knocked. "Mornin', Deb," he said, tipping his hat. "Mornin', Cal." He held up a small, worn notebook. "Mind if I come in a minute?" Donna was already scooping sugar cookies into a Tupperware like we were hosting. She offered him one on the way to the kitchen table. He took it without a word and sat down across from me. "We've reviewed the documents," he said, opening his notebook. "The deed transfer? Signed on a Sunday. Notarized by a man who's been dead 5 years. The county assessor's signature was misspelled, and the doctor listed hasn't had a valid license in this state since 2018. I nodded slowly. Janice emailed over 23 photos, he added. Each geotagged, each inside the house, taken days before the deed was officially filed. He looked up at me. "How long did you say Eric was living there before the filing?" I pulled out my notebook. 28 days. He scratched his temple. He was squatting in a home he didn't own, used fake medical credentials to file a legal document, and removed you with a restraining order based on forged evidence. Don't forget identity theft, I said, sliding a printout across the table. He signed my name. Cal looked it over, then whistled low. You were a nurse, right? Hospice. 23 years. Explains your documentation. Neatest I've ever seen. I allowed myself the smallest smile. He flipped his notebook shut. Well, it's enough. DA's fast-tracking a case for elder fraud, perjury, and unlawful eviction. Could be more, depending on how deep this goes. Donna gasped. They gonna arrest him? Cal stood. That depends. Is he home right now? He should be, I said. Unless Janice threw him out already. He paused at the door, then turned back to me. You know, when Eric filed that restraining order, folks in town started whispering, saying maybe you'd snapped, that the grief had gotten to you. I nodded. I know. Well, he adjusted his hat. They're not whispering that anymore. Then he walked out, slow and sure. I watched from the window as his cruiser backed out of the driveway and headed down Maple Run, toward the house that should have never stopped being mine. By lunchtime, the texts started. From Tammy, they're at the house. I see the sheriff's car. Want me to drive over? From Margie. Just got pinged by the courthouse. Charges filed. He's toast, honey. From a neighbor. A photo of Eric on the porch, arms in the air like he couldn't believe it. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and stirred in another spoonful of sugar. Slow, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. Because I did now. And Eric? Well, he was about to find out that real accountability doesn't come with a warning text. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. sharp, but I was parked in front of the courthouse by 8:10, not because I was nervous, because I wanted him to see me walk in first. Tammy met me by the front steps, wearing a blazer she'd borrowed from a friend and carrying a legal pad like a junior paralegal. Her chin was high. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "Ready?" And I nodded. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and nerves. Every footstep echoed. Every bench creaked too loud. But I'd walked halls far heavier than this. I'd held hands in hospice rooms and whispered comfort while machines beeped their last warnings. Eric and his court-appointed attorney arrived at 8:55. He looked unprepared. Same khakis, same tired loafers, but no Janice this time. Just an overstuffed file folder clutched tight to his chest and a face full of panic disguised as arrogance. He didn't look at me. Didn't have to. I felt it. Court was called to order by a bailiff who probably had no idea how many layers of family history were buried under the words, Case number 22CV-0411, Harrison versus Langston. The judge was a woman named Letitia Greer, stern, mid-50s, no-nonsense bun and tortoiseshell glasses. I liked her instantly. Let's begin, she said, flipping through the file. We are here regarding allegations of fraudulent deed transfer, false medical claims, and unlawful eviction of Ms. Deborah Harrison from her inherited property. Eric's lawyer stood, shifting nervously. Your Honor, my client believed the documents were valid. She held up a hand. Did he verify them? A pause. No, ma'am. Did he confirm the identity or license status of the medical professional listed on the transfer affidavit? No, ma'am. Judge Greer looked unimpressed. Mr. Langston, did you seek legal assistance when filing these documents? Eric cleared his throat. I used an online service. Her eyebrow arched. Which apparently allowed you to use the signature of a deceased physician. His mouth opened, then closed. I took a slow breath, then passed a folder to my attorney, who handed it to the clerk. Inside, the original notarized will, voicemail transcript, screenshot of Janice's posts, the forensic handwriting analysis showing my actual signature versus Eric's forgery. All numbered, all tabbed. Judge Greer flipped through them, pausing at the side-by-side signatures. This doesn't match. No, ma'am, my lawyer said calmly. Ms. Harrison has maintained records as a hospice nurse for over 2 decades. She knows how to document inconsistencies. Greer nodded slowly. It shows. She turned to Eric. Mr. Langston, you claimed your sister was mentally unfit to manage property. What evidence did you submit to support this claim? Eric looked like he might faint. I didn't think she'd fight it. Oh, the judge said, blinking once. She did. The next hour was a slow, methodical takedown. Margie was called to testify. Cool, clear, and certain. She explained the doctor on file had died years prior, that the submission was improperly timed, and that the file raised red flags from the start. Then came Reverend Cole. I visited Marjorie Langston in her final months, he said, voice solemn. She spoke often of her daughter's care, her devotion. She told me plainly she left the house to Deborah. Eric squirmed. The judge folded her hands. Based on this evidence, I am recommending the following: immediate reversal of the fraudulent deed transfer, initiation of a formal investigation into the perjury involved in the restraining order, and a motion to refer the matter for criminal prosecution under elder fraud statutes. She looked directly at Eric. You took advantage of a grieving family, manipulated county records, and tried to steal a home from the woman who cared for your mother while you were absent. Eric's lawyer whispered something to him. He just stared ahead, hollowed out. Judge Greer slammed her gavel once. Court is adjourned. As people stood to file out, I didn't move. I just sat for a second, breathing it all in. Tammy leaned over, her voice low. You won. I turned to her. No, I said, watching Eric slump toward the exit like a deflated scarecrow. I survived. By Friday afternoon, I had the keys back in my hand. Sheriff Pearson delivered them personally, pressing the cool metal into my palm with a firm nod and a gentle, "Welcome home, Deb." I stood on the porch of 317 Maple Run Drive, staring up at the familiar eaves, now draped in the bittersweet shadow of what had been stolen and what I'd taken back. The house looked the same, mostly. Except it didn't. Janice had left her mark, gaudy furniture pieces visible through the front window, a cheap velvet chaise I didn't recognize, and a set of oversized wine glasses still hanging on the kitchen rack, like they'd been waiting for a toast that never came. The door creaked as I opened it. The smell hit me first. Faint perfume, too much lemon cleaner, and something else. Something like cheap entitlement. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me. Quiet. Too quiet. I walked through each room with a yellow notepad in hand, cataloging what was missing. Mom's quilt from the couch, my teacup set from the sideboard, the family Bible that had been on the mantel for 40 years, gone. Eric hadn't just tried to erase me. He tried to replace me. I found a scrap of paper under a decorative tray on the dining table. It was a list in Janice's handwriting. Redo master bath, gold fixtures, replace dining chairs. Deborah's or tragic pool? A pool. I snorted. Good luck digging a pool with a fraud charge hanging over your head. Tammy showed up around 5 o'clock with takeout and an old photo album I hadn't seen since she moved out after college. I figured we could start putting things back together, she said, voice soft. I nodded. Start with the living room. The only thing worse than theft is tacky taste. She laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in a long while. We worked until the sun dipped low, rearranging furniture, wiping down surfaces, lighting a lemongrass candle I'd found in the back of the pantry. By the time we sat down to eat, the house already felt more like mine again. But the peace didn't last. At 7:43 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. You think this is over? I'm appealing. You're not keeping that house. I didn't respond. At 7:45, another one. Hope you enjoyed your little show. You always did love an audience. Still, nothing. At 8 o'clock, I blocked the number. At 8:02, Tammy forwarded me a screenshot from Janice's now private Instagram. It was from earlier that week, leaving town for a while. Some people are allergic to ambition. Scissor? I zoomed in. The suitcase in the background was mine, one of the good ones. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and stared at the bare closet where my mother's silk robe should have been. Tammy appeared behind me. He's not going to let this go quietly. No, I said, calm now. He's not. She hesitated. What do you want to do? I turned, hand steady. I want every single item documented. Every stolen piece, every message, every transaction from that joint account he wasn't supposed to have access to. Her brow furrowed. You want to go back to court? I smiled. No. I want to go forward. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid. That had passed. No, because I had work to do. The house was mine again, but that wasn't the same as closure. Not yet. I wanted the truth in writing. I wanted every last piece of him, his manipulation, his theft, his arrogance, pinned down and preserved, like a butterfly under glass. So I did what I knew how to do best. I documented. By sunrise, I had a spreadsheet logging every item missing from the house, down to a chipped ceramic bird that used to sit by the kitchen window. Bank statements highlighting every transfer Eric made in the months before and after Mom passed, most of them to himself, labeled things like reimbursement and property management fee. Screenshots of Janice's deleted posts, now safely stored in 3 different cloud accounts. The voicemail. Again. And again. I listened to it like a hymn. And then I did something that surprised even me. I sent it all, to the county DA, the sheriff, and yes, even the local newspaper. I didn't add a note, just the documents. Let the evidence speak for itself. By the following Tuesday, an article ran on the front page of the Oak Bend Chronicle. Former caregiver battles fraud to reclaim family home, by Mary Lynn Shoemaker. Langston is facing charges of elder fraud, perjury, and unlawful eviction after his half-sister, a retired hospice nurse, provided extensive documentation of a forged deed and false medical claims. They didn't use my full quote, but they kept the one that mattered. He stole from the dead and lied to the living, but he forgot. Some women take notes. Tammy framed it, hung it right above the kitchen phone, just like my mother used to do with important things. By the end of the month, the court froze Eric's personal accounts. He'd used Mom's name to open a line of credit. That was fraud too. Janice vanished from social media completely. I heard through Margie that she was staying in Atlanta, couch hopping and ghosting subpoenas. Eric's lawyer requested a plea deal. He didn't want a trial. Couldn't risk more public exposure. I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. I had already won. Weeks later, on a soft April morning, Reverend Cole knocked on my door, holding a lattice-top cherry pie. "Thought you might want something sweet to go with all that justice," he said, eyes twinkling. Tammy and I were in the middle of rehanging the old photo wall, wedding pictures, baby pictures, yellowed portraits in ornate brass frames. Perfect timing, I smiled, opening the door wider. We ate in the garden, the very same one Eric had tried to claim as his inheritance. And when the wind blew, it rustled through the lilacs I'd planted with Mom during her last good summer, carrying the scent of something old and healing, something I'd fought to keep. That night, I sealed a padded envelope and wrote a name on the front in my neatest handwriting, Eric Langston, inmate number 38,291 inside. A miniature replica of a house deed, one I'd printed on pink cardstock and aged with a tea bag for flair. It read, Deed of Sole Ownership, The Treehouse, Backyard North Quadrant. Property of Eric Langston, age 8. I taped a yellow sticky note to the front. You always liked playing house. I dropped it in the mail the next morning and never thought about it again. Because I had my house back, my name back, my story back. And Eric? He finally learned the one lesson I'd waited a lifetime for him to understand. Never underestimate the quiet woman who keeps receipts.